I had this conversation with another CEO today because it's not an uncommon issue. When you have a founder-led organization, maybe you're a team lead for a whole bunch of advisors, or you own your own business, who knows what it is, you get something called founder's syndrome. Founder's syndrome is, I built it this way, this is how it works, I love it this way, and nobody can tell me otherwise. So how do we break that? Well, we need to bring talent in around us and build a succession plan around us to replace ourselves with other key ideas that have different perspectives than we have. And that's what Dave was really good at. He surrounded himself with people that were different from him, who could challenge the norm, who could speak truth to power and say, have we tried it this other way? And he was very vulnerable, allowing people to deliver that to him. And that gave me a great perspective of how do you be flexible in your leadership and at the same time not let your ego get in the way of protecting your future. Because us as leaders, we have to replace ourselves. Otherwise, we're doing a disservice to our customers and our business and our employees and everybody else associated with it. So why not start now?
This is the Business of Advice podcast, where we help good advisors become great business owners.
Today, I am excited to welcome a very good friend of mine, going back now well over a decade, I guess. Many of you have heard me talk about this small peer group that I have been a part of that we affectionately call the Dirty Dozen. And you've heard a few of them on this podcast before. Darren Hardy, Mark Sparks, Brad Peterson, Paul Nickham. You can go back and listen to those. But today, I am joined by another amazing leader from that group, Adam Contos. There are so many things I admire about Adam. He is the epitome of never stop growing and is probably the most loyal person I have ever met. Adam was a longtime leader at RE/MAX before assuming the head role of CEO there for years. But his journey to that massive seat is truly inspiring. I'm excited for him to be able to share it with you today. Adam, buddy, I'm glad we finally got it set up. Welcome to the Business of Advice.
Hey, thanks, Cody. It's great to see you today.
It's always fun. I know you so well. We've been friends now for 12, 13 years, I think, as long as we've all been getting together a few times a year. So I know your story well, but I hinted at it in the intro. It is an incredible story of just about growth and I think no limits. And you were leading a SWAT team before you joined RE/MAX and then ended up becoming CEO of that. So maybe just start with that. Can you share your journey? Because it's pretty incredible.
Sure. So day after I graduated high school, I joined the Marines. Most people were going off to party. I was going to boot camp and enjoyed that journey. That was just a great time. I learned a lot, built systems into myself and discipline and work ethic. And when I got out of the Marines, I was in the Marine Reserves. I got into law enforcement. So went to police academy, started doing law enforcement at a young age and grew up. First, I started at a police department, then I went to a sheriff's office. The sheriff's office was one of the fastest growing counties in the country, Douglas County, Colorado. Started growing up quickly there, got on a SWAT team because of my military background and worked my way up relatively quickly. Ended up working a couple of years undercover. That's where I learned sales. So I called it narc marketing. They would drop us on a street corner and say, go buy drugs. And we would have to go out and meet unknown people and somehow figure out how to do a drug deal with them. So it was a good time. I worked my way up to SWAT commander, ran a SWAT team, taught a SWAT school, one of the top SWAT schools in the country. And I got this entrepreneurial bug while I was in that process. So I started two companies. So in the late 90s, I started an online police and government supply company. And then I started a consulting company doing counterterrorism training and threat assessments. That got me into the real estate space because I saw a opening in real estate where real estate agents were getting hurt or killed doing their jobs, unknown places with unknown people, and somehow ended up getting into trouble. So I created a real estate agent safety program. I happen to be friends with the co-founder of RE/MAX, Dave Liniger, who I'm sure you'll hear more about today. And I met the CEO of RE/MAX, Margaret Kelly, at the time, and she said, hey, come present your program to us. We're interested in it. The real estate industry loved it. RE/MAX loved it. They bought into my program, so they hired my consulting company to teach it around the world to their real estate agents. I also taught it to Women's Council Realtors, National Association of Realtors. And essentially, I owned about 50% of the real estate agent safety market at that point. Dave Liniger, who had been mentoring me in my leadership and my entrepreneurship, said, why don't you come work for Remax? I thought, that's an interesting perspective. What would I do? He said, well, you would start by working with our customers, our franchisees, and then see where you end up going. But you have a lot of potential. Thought, terrific. So, about 15 years later, I find myself in the C-suite and part of, our little mastermind group, which I met along the way. Dave introduced me to Darren along the way, and we all started masterminding together and growing businesses. Left Remax in 2021 and went into business with Dave. We started building companies, and essentially here I am now. I'm an investor and partner in Area 15 Ventures. We grow franchise businesses and other businesses and just have a lot of fun doing it. We're leaders, for that matter.
It's going to be fun to have the conversation. One, I know your background pretty well, but like there's so many similarities to our business. But then I think there's some things that you guys have done with transitioning when you kind of took over that they're going to be super helpful for a lot of the advisors that listen and business owners and entrepreneurs. One thing you talked about this, and just curious to get your take, is there, I've seen that discipline, I would say it was probably the Marines that instilled that in a big way, but is there a specific lesson that you would say carried over from kind of that law enforcement background to like corporate leadership? That's a, transition a lot of people don't make. So is there something that helped you prepare for that transition well?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of key points that can be extracted from that. I mean, the first one would be make a decision. A lot of people that get into business are afraid of making a decision. And the reason for that is they have fear, doubt, and overwhelm in their heads and in their hearts. And as a result, they overthink things. In law enforcement, you're on the street or on a SWAT call, you're really in a bad situation. And you just can't sit there and wait. You have to decide, okay, am I making a decision or am I not making a decision? Which is a decision that you're making. So how do you deal with these things? So you have to put all of your feelings aside, really dig into the logic and the framework of deconstructing the challenge and creating solutions out of it, and then implementing things. So probably the first one is to make a decision. And then I would say the second one is get on with it and get over it. So we get too tied up in these things in the corporate world and in our daily lives where we let them carry forward. And you get all these problems that stack up in your mind, and you get overwhelmed easily. I'm overwhelmed. I've got too much going on. Well, the reality is you didn't stop the last thing you had going on and moved on to the next thing. So in law enforcement, SWAT calls, whatever, when you leave that call, you write a report and you're done with it until you go to court for it.
Yep.
So you have to move on and put that thing in a compartment way back in the back of your head, learn from it, but don't dwell on it. And a lot of people in business don't get over things. So they can't move on with their business, with their decisions, with their relationships, whatever that is. So I really learned those two key aspects in law enforcement, in the military as well. But those are really powerful in business because we don't see decision makers or people that can't get over things as much as we really need to.
Yeah, that's good. I wouldn't have thought of that, but that's those are powerful, right? You probably had no idea how big of a role that was going to play, but I see that with a lot of entrepreneurs. Like it's challenging. They'll sit there and worry about something forever versus I always say you're better just to take action and then adjust, in the moment. So you may not make the right decision. You can adjust. It's better to get going. So I kind of mentioned this, you and Dave have both been such a great source of wisdom for me through the years. I think the Remax business so closely models ours, but I always like to say Remax has like a 30-year head start on us. So I also know Dave's been a huge influence on you, and what I want to talk to you about are just some of the lessons in your time with him. Really specifically, we have a lot of advisors who are going through or will be going through like a leadership transition. Some of them transitioning the business over to children or maybe other key employees. And I just I kind of saw that at Remax, right? As you transitioned into that leadership role. So maybe let me start with this question: what was the biggest challenge in taking over the leadership role? Really from like the founder of the company, right? So Dave is just synonymous with Remax. What was the challenge there?
It's funny you asked this. I had this conversation with another CEO today because it's not an uncommon issue. When you have a founder-led organization, maybe you're a team lead for a whole bunch of advisors or you own your own business, who knows what it is. you get something called founder's syndrome. Founder's syndrome is, I built it this way. This is how it works. I love it this way, and nobody can tell me otherwise. So how do we break that? Well, we need to bring talent in around us and build a succession plan around us to replace ourselves with other key ideas that have different perspectives than we have. And that's what Dave was really good at. He surrounded himself with people that were different from him, who could challenge the norm, who could speak truth to power and say, have we tried it this other way? And he was very vulnerable, allowing people to deliver that to him. And that gave me a great perspective of how do you be flexible in your leadership and at the same time not let your ego get in the way of protecting your future. Because us as leaders, we have to replace ourselves. Otherwise, we're doing a disservice to our customers and our business and our employees and everybody else associated with it. So why not start now building a great talent pool so that when it's time for you to step aside, you can sit back and you can bask in your legacy and learn from the continued growth of your organization and probably benefit from it quite heavily. So it was a lot about just watching that vulnerability and that trust in the people that he brought in to do what's best for his company, whether or not he agreed with it.
How did you go about that? Like, if there were things you didn't agree on, obviously I know Dave was a great mentor and you guys had a close relationship, but you're your own man also. So how did you handle things like when you stepped into that leadership role? If it was like something that would have been a big change from the way Dave did it, was he cool with all of those, or like how'd you manage that? I guess
it was funny because my first real look at that was when I did the brand refresh. So basically, I had to take this iconic brand of the Remax hot air balloon and go out and reconstruct it for the modern day. So we went through this entire process of, all right, who's going to go into Dave's office and tell him that his baby is ugly or it just needs to be updated? And of course, I raised my hand and said, I'll go have the conversation with him. And it was foundationally, it was kind of a scary situation for anybody to have to go do that. But based on the fact that we built this trusting relationship where we could agree to disagree on things, and that was through communication. I think you just have to flat out say, we have a great relationship with me, which means that we are not going to be on the same sheet of music on everything. So we need to agree to listen to each other's perspectives and approach those perspectives from a position of opportunity instead of a position of defensiveness. Because nobody wants to hear their business needs to be updated or their business could be better or different or what have you, or maybe they just flat out screwed something up. But if you have that clarity in your relationship and that trust that it's for your betterment instead of somebody's judgment of attacking you, I think we're witnessing the opportunities instead of, really just judging what's going on and throwing a whole bunch of emotions at this. So as we witness this and what the opportunities are factually by making changes, and we accept the fact that maybe our way isn't that great anymore, or maybe there are better ways, it allows for that change to happen. But I will say this, folks, it takes some guts to walk in and have that conversation, especially when you have such a strong leader like Dave. And, I'm not saying that I won't get into the ring with the best of them, but the reality is the guy is a powerful business leader, and he was intimidating. So you have to just, trust in the business, in the concept of that communication and go after it. And you'll be surprised what you can see happen.
One additional question there. I think it was a pretty smooth transition. Obviously, you and Dave spent a lot of time together. There's maybe an observation of like being intentional about your transition plan and strategic in it, I think makes the likelihood of success higher. But were there any specific things that you and Dave were doing, or maybe said in other ways, things that Dave was doing to prepare you for that? Like, was there a certain meeting cadence or things that you would come to him with? Like, how did he prepare you to kind of step into that role?
There were a couple different aspects that we worked on with that. First of all, I didn't have a college degree. I never finished my undergrad when I was a cop. So the board of directors said, hey, wait a sec, if you want to be in the C-suite in a public company, you need at least an undergrad, if not an MBA. So I went and got my MBA in the process. And he actually came to me and said, I need you to do this. And I said, okay. It was without a question. I said, absolutely. I'll go do this. In fact, I love to learn. You and I both experience that same feeling in our hearts and our heads as we want to be the best that we can be. So I looked at it as a great opportunity. But ultimately, I would say that we built structure around how we create that improvement. We built a succession matrix and listed probably about 15 or 20 different things that would really make me a good CEO, but also would make other executives in the organization better at what they do so that they can move on to the next level. So, and I learned this from National Association of Corporate Directors and our board, who had a lot of experience with succession planning. It's important to structuralize that in your business. You have a structured succession plan and education process to ensure that you're checking all the boxes and creating a well-rounded leader in the company. So we did heavily focus on that. Everything from, what's your personal growth like? What's your education like? What are your relationships like? What's your emotional intelligence? What kind of coaching do we need to provide you? All of those things were very closely looked at and followed.
I think the other thing, just, observation from the outside, looking in, spending some time with you guys, is I don't think you can ever underestimate the power of just spending time with that person, right? When David kind of, I think, had this plan for you to take over, just the amount of intentional time that you all spent together, helps you. That probably helps with that trust relationship, right? That you can go in and have those tough conversations with him, but just knowing that you've got someone you can turn to quickly and that wants to see you be successful. I think sometimes, right, wrong, or indifferent, the founder doesn't always want the person coming in after him to be successful. I think they have a hand in picking who that is, and the plan, it probably helps a lot too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's also incumbent upon the founder to make the introductions to other people in their circle.
Yep.
Who else do you want this person to be influenced by? Because, obviously you go back to the Jim Rohn piece, we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So what do you want your average to look like? And who do you want to encircle yourself with when it comes to that influence?
Which is interesting because Dave he brought you like to the Hardy event, started spending time together before you had even stepped into that, that role. So that's good advice also. I'll just maybe wrap up kind of this part, with Dave and the transition and all that. But obviously you have got to share a seat, it's kind of side by side with what I would say is one of the great entrepreneurs of our time. So as you think back on all your time with Dave, are there like 2 to 3 like really big lessons that you've learned from him?
Yes, I would say the first one is it's a people business. And I don't care what business you're in, it's a people business. And Dave has always said that to me. We care about how we treat people. So when you take a look at the relationships that you build, both, on the clock and off the clock, are you treating people well, with kindness, with an open heart? Are you a giver or are you a taker? What does that say about you? And that mattered a lot to Dave. He would put people in different situations, just like you hear about Jack Welch doing this, where you sit down with a waiter or waitress or whatever, or, you even go to the extent of saying, okay, hey, get their order wrong. I want to see how they react to this. Just things of that nature. And Dave would always, I don't want to say test, but he would always look at this whole scientific principle of how does this person act in the laboratory around other experiments going on near them. And it was fascinating because I learned a lot once I picked up on that, observing him. And I had the opportunity to experience that in law enforcement also as we train people. You'd put them out in front of a bad guy and see what they were like and how they react to things like that. So it comes down to that relationship piece, the human psychology, the interaction, and what happens. And another one, I know you asked for a couple of them here, but the second one that I would say, and this one both you and I absolutely share, is Dave always told me a key aspect of leadership is to be a sponge. And I said, okay, I'm going to go learn a whole bunch. I love to learn. He goes, no, that's only half of it. I said, well, what's the other half? He said, well, when you think about a sponge soaks things up. But then what happens when you squeeze it? It gives things back. So as a sponge, you should be learning constantly. And this is a big cultural part of the Dirty Dozen, is we're always learning and giving.
Yeah.
Learning from each other, giving to each other, and giving to others in our organizations. So it's about going and just being constantly hungry for knowledge, wisdom, growth ideas, failures, opportunities, things like that, but then giving the lessons that you learned from those things to the people around you. So that's what kept the business as always growing, is really the relationships and the growth mindset of being a sponge. And I would go back to those over and over again. I've heard that wisdom from others, like Darren brought in Bill McDermott one time, and I asked Bill, what should I think about as a new CEO? He said, stay hungry and stay humble. And I've got that on the wall right behind me in my studio here. But the reality is that says be a sponge. Learn and give.
I remember Dave saying that a few years ago when we were together, and I'd never heard that before, right? Like, it's one thing to absorb all the information, but then if you're not using that to improve the people around you, is kind of how I took that. I think that was a big part of it. And obviously, what I think we both admire about him at his age and the level of success he's had, a lot of people could check it in. The guy, every time we're together, he's read 6 new books, and he's just always learning still at this age, which is pretty fascinating. So I would say you were kind of talking about this, the people side of it, and I think one of the things I've gotten to know about you is the idea of a servant leader's, super popular today. I don't think it was always that way, but I would say that is a good way to describe your leadership style. But what does that servant leadership look like in practice for you? And maybe more importantly, how did that shape, the culture at RE/MAX under your leadership?
I love this question because I come from a culture of not servant leadership.
Yeah.
So military law enforcement, very command and control. It's here's the orders, go execute them. Don't ask why, just do it.
Yep.
And I mean, that was very traditional in, I don't want to say my upbringing, but it was, we'll call it my professional upbringing. And I had to make this massive shift in how I approach things. And I fell in love with the servant leadership piece because you could actually read the results in people when you're giving to them unconditionally, asking for nothing in return, but hoping that influences them to execute on things to make themselves better. And it was really satisfying for me to start working in the private world. And even when I acted this way with my SWAT team, I mean, it was about giving, it was about loving, it was about caring, it was about enjoying your time together. I think it really, it's important no matter where you are or who you are to think about, all right, what can I do to make somebody's day better? And servant leadership doesn't mean you have to, go out and buy somebody a new car or make something spectacular happen in their world. It means that the little things matter to them as human beings, and they appreciate that personal attention and appreciation that they can't give themselves. It's fascinating when you start giving, paying into the relationship through the servant leadership, what you get in return, and it is, exponential when it comes back. So it's functionally, it works great, but satisfying as a human being in your heart, it's immeasurable.
Yeah, it's good. I hadn't thought about that, but your background's very, very the opposite of that. And even Dave, probably to a long time at RE/MAX, was more of a command and control with his military background also. I know that's been a big shift he's talked about over the years too. Here's maybe a follow-up question on the RE/MAX side of things and just leadership there that I think is applicable. That can be RE/MAX could be a very cyclical business as to ours to some degree, right? So you have some times of uncertainty, like market shifts, high interest rates that slow the housing market down. But how'd you go about keeping just morale, motivation high within the organization during some of those times of uncertainty?
I love this question because, we've all gone through a lot of cycles. Everybody went through a cycle called COVID. Mm-hmm. And it was fascinating to watch and see how leaders dealt with that. But ultimately, it comes down to this. Are you present enough to make people believe in what you're doing and what your goals are? So presence creates trust in human beings. In fact, no matter what, presence creates trust. And top of mind is first in line. So how do we, even during these downturns, make people think of us so that when there's a rebound, they want to utilize us for their services, their business, whatever it might be, even just the relationship. We need to continue to pay into those relationships even when they're difficult. And they are difficult during these downturns because we feel the pressures internally on ourselves. just recognize it. Life is going to be hard sometimes, but that's when we lean into our emotions and we really connect more, because here's the reality. Everybody on the other end of the relationship is hurting just as much as you are. So if you can give in a little bit, and emotion is not, it's something that we make up in our head. It's this fear of the unknown. It's this overwhelm. It causes more deals to fail than anything else. So, you look at somebody signing up with an advisor. Why don't they sign up? Well, because they're overwhelmed, because there's too much emotion involved. But if we build this trust and this connection in the relationship, and we give, but we don't ask, we don't want anything in return, guess what? At some point, they're going to reciprocate that giving, and they're going to come back and do those deals. The best people during the down cycles are giving in the most into their relationships for their business, because they know during those up cycles, it's going to catch up with them in spades, and they are going to outperform anyone else in the business that just coasted during those downturns.
I've never asked you this, but what was the biggest challenge when you were in a leadership role there? What was the biggest challenge you had to navigate in your time at RE/MAX?
I would say it was certainly COVID, because we were non-essential for about, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. So the real estate industry just came to a screeching halt, and we derive our revenue from agents who make money, who pay us something every month. So the reality was everybody was so overwhelmed. Everybody's hiding their nuts for the winter. They're scared that the winter is going to stay a long time, and nobody wants to spend any money. So I'm getting phone calls from our customers going, I can't pay you. I can't pay you. I can't pay you. So we had to take a hard look and say, all right, what do we do? Well, we can tap into our cash reserves a little bit. We can give them a little bit of a break, and we can stick by their side and say, we're in it with you. That was really challenging. And then the second component of that was making them not feel abandoned. So I was on video on Zoom or whatever it was at the time for about 12 to 14 hours a day, every single day, Zooming around the world, because everybody on this planet was in that together to make sure everybody knew I cared about them. We got your back. We're going to come out of this together. We don't know when, but let's all fight together for as long as we need to. And I'll tell you what, it made a big difference for everybody, because when, the real estate market boomed after that, and everybody was so happy that they stuck with us and so happy with us that it really made the business a lot of fun at that point.
That's good. That was a challenging one, I think, for everyone. So,
yeah.
One of the things I've said this, like where RE/MAX and AE are very similar. So I'm curious to get your take here, because other people, especially our advisors, have this, right? So you have the culture at RE/MAX headquarters where you have employees who work for RE/MAX, but then you have 50,000 agents across the U.S., and across the world that are associated with RE/MAX too. So you almost have these two different cultures you're trying to manage and navigate. Like, we're very similar. Have our headquarter employees, team members here, and then we have these advisors we're supporting all over. Even our advisors have, their team members in their office, but then the clients that they're serving. How did you approach the culture with those two groups? Was there any difference between like how you approached it at the home office versus with the RE/MAX kind of franchisees? And then did you have to change like maybe leadership style between those two groups at all?
I'll start with the second question first. I don't think you can be something that you're not. So your leadership style is your leadership style, no matter who you deal with. And there's nothing that drives me more crazy than a CEO or a business leader or whatever, who's a different person when they talk to the board, and a different person when they talk to their executives, and a different person when they talk to their employees and their customers. You're a person, and everybody can see that you're fake if you're not that person. So I think the reality is you just need to be you, but you need to be very calculated in you and make sure that you are polished in a manner that people look to as a leader. That gravitas matters. How you communicate, the words that you use when you're dealing with your audience. Now you can use different words for a different audience. Maybe you're talking about shareholder value with your board or governance or something like that, and you're talking about how do you get in your first home the right way to the consumer. But the reality is you're still the same person saying the things that care. So ultimately, it comes down to being you and having a great way of communicating with people across the board in order to accomplish these things. we're all going to find differences in our customers, but what we know we can communicate to them with is their words. So use yourself as a leader, use their challenges to find out their words and communicate with those things together in order to really kind of close the loop on how do you connect with people regardless of who they are, where they are, whether or not they're in, Venezuela, Argentina, South America someplace, or Germany or Great Britain, or, Asia or somewhere around there, or the US or Canada or something like that. Everybody's a human being. We want to be appreciated. We want to have shelter. We want to have this feeling of safety for our families and, for our customers. So what are the words that people need to hear that, transcend all of these boundaries, and be you as a leader to share those words?
That's good. The real estate industry is obviously very competitive. Remax went from, the little startup to become the giant. So then everyone has, you and your in the crosshairs. So what are the things that you all did to focus on creating a competitive advantage for Remax with the agents? Like, why would someone choose Remax over someone else?
So everybody wants to make the most money possible, or have the most satisfaction possible, or a combination thereof, and they want to be appreciated for it. So ultimately it comes down to talking to them and finding out what are their interests and how do they want to get there. And then, being willing to make some changes, to make adjustments, but to continue to talk to the field. Dave always had a statement of the best ideas come from the field. So listen to the field. Don't be too stuck in your ways where you're unwilling to do that. And if we are flexible and open to feedback, and we're going to make mistakes, just be honest with those mistakes. It's people don't want you to hide from your problems. They want you to own them and move on from them. So a combination of all those things, but ultimately listen to the field and care about what those people say.
That's good. Put another way, I think, for everyone listening, it's like often the best ideas are going to come from your clients. Are you asking or listening to what they're saying to you? A lot of people don't. So one of the things, I know we talked about this a lot. One of the things I'm really proud of here at Advisors Excel is our retention rate, meaning when an advisor joins us, like what % of them stay here. Our industry has a fairly, I would say, low or average retention rate, but our historical rate is like over 96%. It's one of the things we watch really, really closely. Obviously, you all have a lot of people trying to poach agents away from you at Remax. How did you go about really thinking about approaching retention at Remax?
Cody, I'm happy to say that I did take some plays out of your playbook when it comes to retention.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I mean, you guys do a fantastic job. And I mean, the reality is you got to care about your people, and you got to showcase your people and help them. I mean, first of all, appreciate what they've done, but also understand that they can do more. So awards are huge. We always spend a great deal of time recognizing our agents and our franchisees. And even in the franchise networks that I'm in now, we really appreciate everybody and take some time to show that. But ultimately, it comes down to, yes, people want a paycheck. They want to make a good living, but they want to be appreciated and be proud of the fact that they have great relationships with people around them who are proud of them. So it's really not that complicated, but it's a daily activity. And it's like the whole theory of, you're like, oh, all right, we're going to go on a date. You're single, you're looking for somebody, you take them flowers, you go on a date, you wine and dine them, you really take good care of them, you're a great person. And then you do that again, and you do that again. And then after a while, you stop bringing the flowers. Or it's instead of, the endearing phone call, it's, all right, I'll talk to you later, bye. Things like that. We want to be married to these people in our business relationships for a long time. So let's act like it, for crying out loud. And that's something that you guys at Advisors do so well, is nobody's forgotten about. Nobody's, taken for granted. They're appreciated on a regular basis. I've heard you talk about some of your very top people over and over again. I'm like, wow, you really care about the people in your organization. Even though you have so many, they matter to you. That's important in the culture of a company. Yeah. No matter at what level you're engaged at, everybody matters. And if you're appreciated, that culture permeates through the organization, and people really want to be there because they get that self-gratification of being part of something bigger.
That's good. Another question I have for you, and this kind of applies to Remax, but I'll say even in a way like the franchise model, right? Because you're growing some others. We'll probably talk about some of the other things you all are doing now. But our advisors, and here's specifically why I want to ask this, we have a lot of advisors who are expanding and now opening offices in multiple states, multiple cities. And some of them, I think the challenge is how do you make sure that those standards in an office that you can't see every day are the same? How have you gone about approaching making sure, whether that was at Remax, where, they're kind of an independent franchisee, but they're still under this brand and you want a certain standard or expectation, or take like a Porta Subs that you have now that you're growing and expanding, like how have you gone about making sure that there's a standard in how all of those offices operate?
Well, I would say, first of all, you can't hope that they're going to operate to that standard. We all need to be reminded of where the bar is in our business, and it needs to be measured regularly. That's why we have secret shoppers. That's why we have, inspections of some sort. And it's also why we have employee surveys, as well as customer surveys. You have to listen to all those different things, but set the bar someplace and just make sure that you're getting over that bar of that standard that you set. That's done through your culture. That's done through communication. That's done through regular, like even on this podcast, Cody, I mean, you can hear the culture of your organization within this podcast. And it's a constant reminder of people that, hey, we don't tolerate mediocrity. We're going after the, maximum possible instead of the minimum necessary in this industry. So we want the best advisors in our organization, and we want to help them get better because we have a network of great people. So if you're willing to lean in and put the best into the business, we're going to put the best into you. If that's not your interest, we're not interested in you. So, I mean, it's a function of just being clear in your standards and then going after those on a regular basis and measuring where you're falling and not allowing people to just skate by with, some mediocrity here and there. So, you see businesses all the time where they're like, oh, they're having problems. And then somebody comes in, a new CEO or new executive or whatever, and they start to implement some standards, and you instantly see this thing skyrocket because people are reminded of good performance instead of just going there to pick up a paycheck or make their commissions or something like that. They're actually outperforming where they thought they could or where they fell into that rut of, and it does amazing things. But yeah, you got to keep an eye on it. You got to communicate about it. You got to build it in your culture. You got to test it. And then you got to stretch the limits.
One thing I love, I wrote down remind and measure, right? Like you need to constantly be reminding people of what the standard is and what that looks like, but then also making sure that you're measuring it. It's kind of fascinating. We haven't talked as a group lately. We haven't been together. We're going to be together in a few months, but like even watching a little bit of what like Starbucks is going through right now, right? Because Howard Schultz builds this in. They had a certain standard. He left. It kind of slipped. He came back. He's left, and right now that standard's kind of slipped again. They brought in a new CEO quickly. I think the last guy made it like less than 18 months, but They brought in a new CEO, and that's one of the first things. If you hear him talking right now, he's talking about we have these standards that we've got to get back to that we've just gotten away from. So I love that idea of like, what are those standards, and constantly reminding them of them. So, okay, this is probably something I'm guessing when you first started, you never thought that you would one day publish a book. So we have the book Start With a Win that you wrote, this has got to be 4 or 5 years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know, time flies by. But maybe I'll start here. Just people should go pick it up. But like, what made you want to write a book, and what was that process like? And then I'll jump into some specific questions around it.
Well, I'll throw the props out to our friend Darren. You sit in the business masterclass, or the high performance forum as it was known back then, and he would go around the room and go, all right, who's written a book? And some people would raise their hand up, and he'd go, okay, who's going to write a book? And I mean, that really got me going on, all right, I should probably write a book, because we all have a great story within us. And how do you interpret that story into be actionable steps for somebody else to actually make a difference in their life with? And once I started outlining this, which I found out that I'm not a professional author. I had to go hire somebody to help me put all these ideas together. But ultimately, it comes down to the fact of, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's that you're building a legacy that your family can pull off the shelf and reflect on and say, why is our family the way that it is? Where did our values originate from? And how is our business running if you're in a company and you're a key leader in an organization? It's nothing but good ways to share those great things that have happened to you and that you're sharing with others. So I think it's a big legacy piece. It's a great business card. I'd rather send somebody a book than a thank you note. Send them a thank you note with a book, and they remember it.
Yeah.
So, but I never thought I'd write one until Darren started poking me and going, "Hey, when are you going to write your book?" And I'm honored that he pushed me to do that, and I love the fact that it came out.
That's good. So a few things I want to hit in there. You talk about the idea of CEO mindset and really encouraging people to develop that. Like, can you share maybe a personal story that best represents like the idea of CEO mindset?
Sure. So in life and in our business, we always get stuck in somebody's problem in the room. And I mean, ultimately, everybody's got a challenge when it comes to a project, how to get something done, how to meet our customer numbers, how to make those extra phone calls, whatever it is. And we stop thinking like a CEO. We stop with what's called enterprise thinking. Enterprise thinking is not the what's in it for me. What's in it for me is kind of employee thinking. That's, really the favorite words of any employee in your organization are me, myself, and I. And we need to stop thinking about that. Now, when we go up to manager thinking, we're thinking about my team. I'm going to protect my team from the man. It's still resistant against the key leadership in the organization and really the cultural values of the organization overall, because we're thinking about protectionism instead of growth. And then when you start getting to the CEO level thinking, you're thinking about the organization. It's a selfless thinking that goes on. And it happens in military, it happens in business, it happens in families, where the key leader can't be selfish. The key leader has to be a giver, because when you're thinking about the enterprise overall and everybody within the enterprise, you know that when the enterprise wins, everybody wins. So when we can think of it from that key level, how do we grow everything instead of somebody going, I want my bonus? No. Let's grow the whole company, and then everybody gets their bonus instead of you getting your bonus. Or let's grow the brand overall so that everybody's aware of our brand, so that everybody in the brand wins together. And you have to kind of break that paradigm of me, myself, and I in order to get people thinking on an enterprise level. And when you take a look at life itself, you're sitting at a stoplight. Am I better waving people on because traffic's going to flow? Or am I trying to fit myself in, into traffic? And I'm kind of working from a selfish heart at that point. So CEOs don't have a selfish heart. They have a selfless heart. They have this enterprise thinking, this the thinking that I think is frankly better for society, because we're not trying to forsake our company for everything else. We're trying to make our company profitable and successful, but we're doing it so that everybody in the company and everybody associated with the company wins. And that way we all win.
It's funny when you see some of the CEOs under attack, or even the idea of it, right? And generally speaking, the most successful CEOs I've ever met are some of the most generous and most giving and care about the organization, so much more than themselves, which is not always how the perception is. So a few other questions from it. You talk about leading with intention. Throughout your career, were there any experiences that really shaped that idea of leading with intention?
I think probably the best example of leading with intention is when you end up, this, to take from one of our friends in the dozen, Mark, when you have to prune. And, a big part of growth is getting rid of the dead wood or the dead weight, or, you think of a rose bush, and how do you create big, beautiful blooms on the rose bush is you trim off all the ones that are preventing those big, beautiful ones from growing, from sucking up the nutrients. So you prune the bush in order to create growth within that. Well, it's the same thing in our businesses. Sometimes we have to make these tough decisions, and we have to, really make unpopular decisions and make changes in the organization in order to see things soar. So really when it comes down to it, a key aspect is be willing to make the tough decisions in order to see the growth of the organization and the good decisions happen after that. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I think it really
I think
hammers it.
yeah, and the key there is like you're making intentional decisions that are best for the organization, right? Trying to drive it
Totally.
forward. And if people want more in that pruning, I think Mark did one of the only podcasts he's ever done when he jumped on with me. So when we talk about that,
Yeah.
he's famous for that. So they should go back and listen to that. Well, one other question I'll ask you: talk about the idea of operational efficiency. And what I'm seeing right now, especially in so many of our advisors, is as they're scaling their organizations, there's more and more of this focus on like, man, how do we become more efficient in what we're doing, to allow us to scale at a better rate? Are there some examples from your time as like CEO or in key leadership roles that demonstrate like how you go about improving efficiency within the organization?
Yeah, I think best way to obviously improve efficiency and the things that leaders need to be looking at is, what are you wasting time on, for crying out loud? One of the key things that I did was, we always had these leadership meetings. I mean, they were constant. Hey, we're getting together to talk about this. We're getting together to talk about that. I freaking hate meetings. Why? Because you look around, it's the whole, only enough people in the room for a pizza, or only enough people in the room that are contributing to the meeting, things like that. Well, businesses become inefficient with their time quicker than anything else. And when you're trying to create operational efficiency, what gives you operational efficiency? Better use of your time. So why? Because you can do more with more time. So ultimately it comes down to, stop having so many freaking meetings. Somebody should wear a t-shirt around the office that says this meeting should have been an email. But ultimately, I started scheduling my meetings. I only allowed meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays from, I think it was like 9 to 11 and then 1 to 3. And people were going, well, I can't meet with you during those times. And I go, well, that's your problem, not mine. If you want to have a meeting during those times, talk to my assistant. Those are the times that we're going to have meetings with the executive team. Otherwise, all we're doing is sitting in each other's offices, looking at each other, talking about something stupid. Let's go get things done to make things happen. And I mean, that's number one in operational efficiency. Number two is, stop opening tabs on your computer that really don't serve your company very well. So, we end up chasing the shiny thing around all day. We're all ADHD now. And ultimately it comes down to what makes money for your business. That's really what your operational efficiency boils down to. What are your key pillars? If you're in the restaurant space, your key pillars are, what am I paying for rent? What am I paying for food? And what am I paying for labor? And that's it. And then how do I, leverage those things? I market more. I figure out where my marketing is the most effective, and, I expand upon those things. So, what's wasting your time, what's making you time, what's wasting your money, and what's making you money. If we actually have honest conversations with ourselves in business about those things, we can all benefit from it. But operational efficiencies are imperative in business. They're imperative in life. I won't sit at home and watch the news. Our group is pretty religious about not wasting time,
Yep.
not wasting money. And I would suggest everybody take a look at, Darren's book, The Compound Effect, to improve your operational efficiencies in your life and in your business. But there's a lot to be made when you start working on it.
Well, and it is crazy, it's how easy it is to become distracted today, right? I mean, you have a lot of powerful companies doing their best to keep you distracted. I was just in an event last week with John Maxwell, and he said something. He's like, the superpower for leaders today is being able to block out distractions and focus, right? He's like, the people that are going to be the winners are the ones that can block distractions and be able to focus and get stuff done. And I just say that, I think every once in a while, especially maybe if you're listening to this, doing an audit, an honest audit of where you're spending your time, and you'd be shocked. I know Darren talks about that a lot. How much time are you wasting on these things that you don't even realize you're doing it, right? That you clicked on some social media site and you end up scrolling for 30 minutes and, could have been doing something productive. So I think that's good. You talked about, key pillars in a restaurant, which is a good pivot to transition a little bit into what you're up to today. I know you talked at the beginning, but you've left Remax, but kind of leveraging your knowledge of franchising in some new ways. So maybe just share a bit about Area 15 Ventures and what you're up to there.
Sure. So we love the franchise space. There's a lot of leverage to be found in franchising. It's helping people grow their businesses in order to grow your business. And I absolutely love the concept. I'm on the board of the International Franchise Association, work quite a bit with really a multitude of different brands and concepts out there. So realistically, what we're doing is we've got investments in, or we have ownership in a couple of different food concepts. We have Porta Subs, which is about 135, 140 units. And I used to say the Western U.S., but now we're opening locations on the East Coast as well. We just closed a huge multi-unit deal in the DC metro area. And we're actually expanding globally. More to come on that here in the near future. Cody, you and I talked a little bit about that.
Yeah.
But it's going great. We love it. And it's, for some reason, the sub sandwich concept has amazing multiples and valuations when you start seeing a lot of growth in your business, which we are seeing now. I think we've got commitments for 320 stores so far this year. So, and we have quite a few coming out of the ground. So it's just super exciting. We have Daddy's Chicken Shack, which is a startup fried chicken sandwich concept. We're coast to coast in that one as well. So a lot of great things happening there, continuing to open more stores there. And then we also have some ownership in, some other franchises, such as some motorcycle dealerships, Harley Davidson, and then some other smaller different business concepts through the Liniger family office.
That's cool. As you all are making investments into some of these companies, are there any key things that you look for as you make an investment?
Yeah, I think the first one you look for is the people. And, do the people really have the heart and soul in the business? Do they love what they do, and do they love who they do it with? If you don't have that, really all you have is just a shell of an organization. You got to have a heart and soul in it. And that heart and soul is truly the people and what they're doing it for. I always ask the question of, how long have you been here? Because it tells me, there's a lot of loyalty in the organization, but also, okay, what's your performance level? Because if you just kind of have a run and maintain group that's been there forever, then all they're in it for is a paycheck. But if they're actually growing things and they're doing things for purpose and a reason, then you have some real go-getters that have a deep understanding of the business and really love who they're, like I said, who they're doing it for. And then, of course, the financials have to work. Is it something you can make money at? Is it something you like doing, the framework or the systems? We were never into fried chicken sandwiches or sub sandwiches, but we love franchising. So that framework is fantastic. We love the framework. We can, if it's a hair salon, Cody, I know you visit that a lot, or, a car dealership or a car wash or, who knows what it is, but businesses have a system that they work around. And if you love that system and what it's about, then, you've got interest in it and you have a desire to make it better. So that's all the things that we're in we've really enjoyed and we like because of the systems in the business and the people part of those.
You've had some early wins, right? I think the Porta Subs it sure looks like it's going to be a huge win. Maybe a few that are TBDs if they're going to be a win or not. Have you been able to identify, I know it's kind of early into this new venture, but the difference in those? What's going to make something a winner and what's going to, I know it's a little bit of a follow up to maybe the question before, but just curious if you've figured out yet, what makes a winner, what makes a loser?
Yeah, I think, first of all, there's a difference between a startup and a 50-year-old company. So, Porta Subs is a 50-year-old company. Daddy's Chicken Shack is a startup. So you're going to go through some different growing pains with those, but ultimately you can learn one from the other. And, you make adjustments, but yeah, some of these are a little more challenging than others, but you also have great opportunity coming from those. We've seen a lot of transactions in the sandwich space. We haven't seen a whole lot of transactions in the fried chicken space, but those will start happening as the fried chicken sandwich concept matures in the country. I think we'll start to see some acquisitions and some changes in those. And that's when you start realizing your wins is when, okay, people really have latched onto these concepts and they want to run with them. But, growing them to those points, to your point, is challenging sometimes, but we learn something every day from them and grow with it. And you just, you got to keep your head down and keep doing what's best for the company and best for the people.
Like we said, we just need you to get that, $1 billion exit like Jersey Mike's just did. So That'll
There you
make it
go.
worth it. So, is there? I have maybe one final question, but and then we'll transition into these lightning round questions. But when you look at what you're doing today, what has you most excited?
Well, I mean, this year has been super exciting for Porta Subs, and I'm the interim CEO of Porta Subs. I'm working with the president of the company on that. That's super exciting to me. At the same time, we just got all of our companies together and did what we call the Align Conference. And I got to talk about a key component of leadership, which is employee engagement and how to foster employee engagement in your organization. I love the fact that we are very interested in leadership development and employee development. So that's one of my key desires, is to help our people be the best that they can be. And we're super excited about it. So that's, that keeps the fire lit for me, is knowing that I'm helping grow people like you and I get together with our friends to grow each other.
I said that was the last question. I do have one more. We were kind of messaging about this before, but like, we have a lot, I shouldn't say a lot. We have some advisors who are going through transition. Some have sold their businesses. There's some private equity buying and rolling up stuff in the space. And a lot of times I don't think they realize maybe what those changes are going to look like, especially if they have to stick around for a while. You were in leadership at Remax when it went through a big transition from going to a private company to a public company. Just any lessons that you learned over that time, maybe challenges or just things that, I don't know, lessons learned is probably the easiest way to ask that, about just going from private held company to public held company, and like thinking more so like, when you have that change in ownership, what you should be expecting.
Yeah, I mean, you could do an entire podcast on this one, but I guess it comes down to, nobody knows your business like you know your business. And, you'll get private equity or, an IPO group come in or an acquisition or something like that. And they're like, yes, we want to invest in you or take you public or do whatever it is. But they don't know your business, the ins and outs, the challenges, things like that you face. And they seem to have this delusion of grandeur of, if we just add this certain type of technology or AI or whatever it is to it, it's going to explode. And you're like, no, it's not. Oh, yes, it will. And, it's fascinating. Everybody thinks that things are easier than they are when it comes to coming in and making these changes in your business. They're not. They're harder. Going through an IPO, and like you said, I wasn't in the C-suite, but I was in senior management, going through the IPO, and it was fascinating to go through it and see it. But I did spend essentially 5 years, doing road shows for Wall Street and investor calls, quarterly earnings calls, things like that, and got to see a substantial part of that, as well as go through debt restructuring and things like that. The reality is, all these people that are trying to get you excited about doing this because it's good for you, it's really just good for them. And they're in a business, their business is doing this, and they're trying to take your business and leverage that to make money for their business. Yep. So, what are you trying to accomplish here? There's some benefits to it, for crying out loud. You can take some chips off the table. You can, tap into the equity markets. You can raise money easier for your business if you're a public company than you would otherwise. But ultimately it comes down to, what is your goal, and why are these people trying to push you into this? Why is it their goal for you to do this? So I would, first of all, if you don't have to do it, I wouldn't do it. Just to say, we went through an IPO, yay. Okay, you got that feather in your cap. But for crying out loud, until you're doing earnings calls every quarter and dealing with investor calls and all things like that, God love them. We need Wall Street, we need the markets, we need investors. But, if that's what you want to spend your time doing as a key business leader, great. God love you, go do it. If you want to spend time growing your business and working directly with your people and not spending money on a whole bunch of attorneys and, financial analysts and things like that, okay. That's what I'll say. It's great for some people. It's not for others, but go into it with eyes wide open and know that it is a lot of work and sometimes a lot of frustration, a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of money to be made, but there's also a lot of money to be
That's
lost.
good. Good lesson. Okay, lightning round questions. These can be short answers. I'm sure you've heard some of them, but first one is, what lesson, let's start with COVID. I think it made leaders rethink things, but what lesson did you learn over the past few years that you feel like you'll carry forward for the rest of your career or life?
I would say connecting matters. And what I mean by that is don't forsake your relationships. Make sure you're investing in your relationships. And that investment just needs to look like a phone call, an appreciation, a connection, something like that. But I don't care where you're at, what you're doing, those connections matter.
That's good. Okay, second question. What is the one thing that you did that graduated you from good to great?
Oh, wow. I would say I found a peer group that holds me accountable. And, we've been through a lot of high performance forums, business masterclass, things like that. But ultimately, having a friend group like yourself, Darren, Mark, Paul, Brad, all the guys, Madison, you name it. And of course, Dave, my mentor and best friend. You got to find some people to hold you accountable, and that will push you beyond where you think you can be, but you have to be willing to accept the feedback.
That's good. Okay, third question, kind of related to that, but is there something you're doing this, like I'll say either now or in the year to come, since we're kind of towards the end of the year, to drive your own personal growth that you're excited about?
Yeah, I'm working on my health a lot. And I have this saying, how we do one thing is how we do all things. And if you really want to, push yourself across the board holistically, start by working on your health. And, both in the gym, how you eat, what you do to yourself, things like that. But, and then reflect on that and push yourself through your other growth mechanisms by noticing the changes that you get out of that and the happiness, and notice what success does to your mind and your body.
It sure feels like there's a lot of people that this has become somewhat of a reality of, like, just a health focus. A lot of people I've talked to lately that it's been a big part of what they're doing. So I know this isn't normally a question, but any specific thing like that you've seen that you're excited about from like just health journey?
Yeah. I feel like by having a good readout and understanding, and I know you're really into the body scans and the health practices yourself, balancing the hormones, making sure that there's nothing hiding from you within your body, and then also putting goodness into it, both through exercise, water, eating right, things like that. I think ultimately it's a big picture of the whole thing, but I'm not missing it more than a day. And, we can all go out and have fun and have a great meal and, a great bottle of wine, whatever it might be. But the reality is, don't fall off the horse and then not get back on, because every day matters in our health. So, and I use an app for working out. I love it. It records streaks of healthiness. And I love putting those streaks together. I like gamification in my head. But ultimately, as soon as you start wandering away from the purpose, then it's gone. And I try to stay close to the purpose, which is to get healthier, stronger, more fit, and appreciate the feelings that go with that.
That's good. Okay, fourth question. What is the book, can't be your own, book you've recommended most to other entrepreneurs or business leaders?
Well, there are so many good ones out there. But, I got to say, without a doubt, The Compound Effect, Darren's book. It works. In fact, my wife and I had a conversation about it today. It had nothing to do with this podcast. That Kelly goes, that's the compound effect in action. And I agree, because when you look at doing something once, yay, you did it once, big deal. But if you can do it 100 times, what are the compounding effects of that? And everything has a compounding effect. That's a huge one to take advantage of. So if you haven't read the book lately, everybody, Cody, I know you're very familiar with it. Take a look at it. Darren Hardy, The Compound Effect.
Did Darren put you up to that? Did he know you're going to be on? No,
he did not.
He'll have to buy you a drink when we're together as a thank you. So, okay, final question. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
I would say never settle. I mean, we're all out there doing something, and we all get by. We get into this get by mode, but if you get into this never settle mode, you're always going to get better. And when I look at something and like, even in the gym, since we're on the health topic, okay, if I'm going to do 8 of these, don't settle. Give me another one.
Yeah.
If we never settle, you make one more client call, you send one more thank you note, you appreciate one more people you see during the day, you give out one more Starbucks card just as an unexpected gift to somebody. If we do that and we never settle for how good we are or what we're doing, we're always going to be better. So tomorrow is a beautiful thing if we're not settling.
That's good. Hey, the event I was at with John Maxwell, he said something very similar. He said, good leaders tend to settle a lot. The best leaders never settle. And he said something, I've seen this in you. He said, it doesn't mean you're not grateful for what you've accomplished and what you've achieved and what you had, but you're always hopeful that there's something even better out there. And I see that in you all the time. So Adam, my friend, I appreciate the time today. Thankful for our friendship. I know I've said this before, but you are one of the most loyal people that I've ever met. It's admirable the way that you take care of Dave, and just I know he's been a close friend to you, but just speaks to your character. So for those who want to follow your journey, what's the best way for them to follow along? And obviously they can pick your book up also, but just how should they follow along with what you're doing?
You can go to adamcontos.com. Easiest way to find me. It has a connection to all of my social media channels, as well as my leadership class. I have an online leadership class if you're interested in that, called the Leadership Factory. Just click on that button. But that's how you can get in touch with me, and I've got some free gifts for you on that.
Awesome. I appreciate it, buddy. It's always good to see you, and looking forward to being together in a few months.
See you soon, Cody. Thanks.